Thanks everyone for joining us. We're going to go over the new Xero integration, which is pretty exciting. I think probably the exciting part for a lot of our existing customers that already use the old integration is that this one will send your invoices over without having to download a file and upload the file. Not that it's that hard when you've done it for a while, but it's still nice to have it integrated seamlessly. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It does a couple other cool things as well, so we'll go over that. The usual thing, I don't know, the audio can't be turned on anyway, but with the chat, like we've been using it to say where we're from, but we're not going to use that as Q&A stuff. So if you have got questions, there is an actual Q&A section. Is it there? Yeah, it is there. Yep. So yeah, definitely use the Q&A to ask your question, because then you can see the questions that other people are asking as well, and then we'll go through the Q&A. I love a good Q&A, so we'll be happy to do a big Q&A session at the end. Question that everyone asks every time is, are we going to record it, and are we going to send the recording? 100%. Yep, we're going to be using it, and then we'll actually be using this session to have it on our documentation as well, on our help articles and stuff. So yep, there'll be a recording for sure. All right, let's get started on the new Xero integration. So look, I've gone from complete scratch to show you guys how it works. I think probably the first thing to note is that in your account and settings section, there is still going to be the old area to have the payroll software, and you still at the moment can choose Xero, but that's kind of referring to our old integration. And so it probably is going to be a good idea to actually switch, when you do want to switch to the new integration, is to set this to other. That way it will remove all the Xero buttons that are related to the old integration from your system, and you won't see the old integration essentially. So we're not going to be using this section here. The section that it is in further down on this settings page, there is a Xero integrations. So by the way, as it stands right now, if you're following along with me in your ShiftCare, you're probably not going to see it there, because I am going to activate it for everybody after the webinar. So we are going to turn this on so that everyone can start using it, but it won't be there right now. So just hold your horses on that one. But yeah, essentially you flick it on. So what that does when you turn on the Xero integration is it adds it over to this section over here. So you've got integrations, and now you can see along with the old CSV import, there's a Xero integration. So when you go into the Xero, you do need to set it up. And even if you are on the old integration, you still need to reset everything up. That's just part of how it works. So first thing you got to do is connect to it. Now, some of you may have noticed this, that in the last 6 or so months, we have added a requirement that you have to have 2FA enabled to be able to connect to Xero. It's actually a requirement that Xero kind of made us implement just for data integrity and making sure that, nobody can do anything too dodgy. So essentially, I deliberately left it off so I could show you guys how the 2FA works, just to make sure that you all know how that works. So the way you turn 2FA is you click up on your name up on the top right, and you go to profile. And then down the bottom here is two-factor authentication, and then you go enable. And you have to put in your current password, and then it sends you a code to your email. And then once you get that code, you put that code in, and then that enables 2FA on your account. And of course, every time you log in after that, you've got to get that 2FA code, which we all love the 2FA. All right, so now that I've enabled 2FA, that's going to allow me to connect to Xero. So I'm going to click connect to Xero. It's going to pop up and ask me to choose the ShiftCare, the account from Xero that I want to connect to. So I'm going to connect to the Xero that I made for this. So from there, that's the first thing you need. You do, you connect it. Now, the next thing is you've got to set your pay groups and your allowances. Now, your pay groups and allowances are still set up in here in your pay group section. And so you do need to still have your pay groups all set up here. So you will set up all just like you previously had. If you've already got this all set up, it's not going to be a drama for you. But yeah, you need to have the days of the week and the times of the day and everything like that. But the difference is that you don't set the actual sync of the. So in the previous integration, you would actually choose the Xero pay item here. That's going to be in the new area, but you still need to create all your pay groups here to sync them up. Same with allowances. You'll have your allowances in here. You've got your mileage and your sleepover and stuff like that. And so then what you'll do is you'll go down to integrations and you go back to Xero, and then you come here and you go, okay, I want to set the pay groups. So I'm going to choose my default casual, and I'm going to come through and say, okay, well, 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. on a Monday to Friday is afternoon hours. That's public holiday, so I'm going to set it to my public holiday. This is Sunday. This is Saturday. This is ordinary hours, and this is night hours. So you hit save, and that's how you sync the pay groups like you used to in the other section. Allowances, same sort of thing. I'm going to come in here and go, yep, that goes to mileage. This goes to sleepover. And I'm not sure if I added expense. I did. Yep. Hit save. And so now I've got my 3. So I've got everything synced up to sync the allowances and the pay groups as per the same way we used to do it in the old integration. And obviously the pay items need to be all set up in Xero for that. We've got to import staff directly from Xero. So these are there's 4 things that this integration will do, which is pretty cool. So it will import your staff from Xero. It will import your clients from Xero. It'll export timesheets to Xero, and it will export invoices to Xero. Now, it's actually kind of important for the staff side of things that you do this import staff directly from Xero. Even if your staff exist in ShiftCare, you need to do this because this is how it links the staff between ShiftCare and Xero. So if the emails between the 2 systems match, it's going to link them together. If there is a staff member in Xero that doesn't exist in ShiftCare, it's going to create the staff, and then that will link them together as well. Now, we are adding a field. So one of the feedback that we got, or that we've always had, is this whole situation where the email that you've got in ShiftCare is different to the email that you've got in Xero. And that's pretty common because, I mean, in this situation here, I'm using this whole alias email address to have multiple logins, which people know they have to do for their carers if they've got the same email in another provider. But also you might be using your work email in ShiftCare, but of course your Xero email is going to be your private email because that's where you get your pay slips and stuff like that. So the emails aren't going to match up. And so we're actually rushing through a change. It's not in yet today, but we're going to have a setting here in the payroll setting where you can actually set the payroll email. And so that's where you can put an email address that if they do have a different email address in their Xero that's different from this email, you can put it in here and it's going to match on that email instead of matching on the staff email. So that's going to solve that issue, which is really good. So I will go through. So let's go back to integrations in Xero and let's go to import staff. And so this is where the process so it kind of tells you what it's going to do. It's going to import these fields. It's going to give you a bit of a note about who the roles are and what role they're going to be given. It's going to create a new account. Down here, there is a tick box here about sending the setup emails. So what we kind of figure the process is going to be when you get a new staff that you're onboarded is that you will create that staff member in Xero first. And instead of having to create it twice, you can create it in Xero, put the info in that you need from the payroll side of things. And then you can just come into ShiftCare and hit this import staff. And you don't have to like manually create a whole new profile for the staff member in Xero, in ShiftCare. It'll be good to go. So this tick box is saying, do you want to send that email? You know, the email that says, hey, you've been invited to join ShiftCare. So yeah, you may as well tick that normally to save you having to manually go in and send that email. But let's hit import staff. So that's going to go in, and in Xero, we can go to payroll and employees, and you'll be able to see that I do have a whole bunch. I actually created a whole bunch of staff. So I created 34 employees just to have a few there. So it might take a couple of minutes. Oh, there it goes. So we can see here that the import's successful. So I can click in here to view staff. And now instead of just the one staff member that I had before, I now have 34 staff, or 35, including me, in ShiftCare. So pretty smooth. It creates all the things. And like I said, the biggest thing about this now is that there, not only did it create it in ShiftCare, it linked them between ShiftCare and Xero. So now ShiftCare knows that they're in Xero, and we can send timesheets for them and stuff like that. So that's really cool. Let's go back to the integrations. We'll go back to Xero. Let's go to clients. So we're going to do the same with clients. And again, with clients, it's look, this isn't a requirement. And I probably would say that it's probably going to be rarer that you're actually going to do this. Usually it'll be that you create the clients in ShiftCare and you invoice them, and then you send them over to Xero, which will create the client in Xero. And that will still do that. So it's not like the staff where you have to have the staff member created in Xero and do the import. You totally don't have to do this step. But I am just going to show you just in case, because you might have a whole bunch of clients in Xero that you want to bring into ShiftCare. In this case, I've just created one client to keep it simple. And so if I come in here and go import clients, it should hopefully just create the one client for me. Give it a couple of seconds. There it goes. So one import created. So if I go to view clients now, we'll be able to see there's that client that I just created. By the way, it does say he's 124 years old. He isn't a world record holder for age. What he is that Xero doesn't actually have a field for age in it, so you can't set a date of birth. And so our system requires a date of birth as part of creating a client. So we're just set it to put the 001/01/1900. So you'll need to come in and adjust their date of birth after you've done the import. So yeah, other than that, we've done the first two steps now. We've created a client and we've created a whole bunch of staff. And so what I thought we'd do now is let's build a couple of shifts. So I'm going to come in and I'll do for the week of the 2nd to the 8th. And let me just double check my payroll. I'm pretty sure I set it to be the same frequency. I'll make sure I do it all correctly, otherwise it won't work. Yeah, 2nd to the 8th. Cool. So I'm going to create a shift. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to go, yep, it's assistance in self-care. Let's do it 9 to 5. And we'll repeat it daily until the end of the week. We hit save. Should have probably put a staff member on it. That's a good idea. Let's put Aiden on it just to keep it simple. Cool. All right, so we've created a shift for every day of the week, 9 to 5. And so we've got two things we're going to want to do now, timesheets and invoicing. Now, it might be a good opportunity for me to quickly touch on the changes that you guys might have noticed that we did on the timesheet report, where on the right-hand side, instead of having an approve word here, it's now got 2 thumbs up when you go into the report. That was actually a change that we kind of have made as part of another feature that we're rolling out soon, which I'm really excited about. So gonna give everyone the cool heads up now that we're changing. So at the moment, when you invoice, you always invoice based on the roster time that you created. So if it was a 9 to 5 shift, it'll always invoice 9 to 5. What we're doing is we're changing it that if you approve a shift based on the clock in and clock out time, so say the staff member had to stay back half an hour and you approve that and you increase their pay to 8.5 hours, it will also invoice based on the clock in and clock out time. So it will invoice the client without you having to edit the shift and change the time of the shift. So that's something I'm going to do another webinar on and talk about. But as part of that, I kind of said, you know what would be nice, guys, if we didn't have to click 5 times to approve a shift based on the schedule times, and if we had a way of single clicking approving both either clock in and out times or schedule times, and that's why they changed it for us. So that's pretty cool. So you can come in now and say, yeah, I approve schedule time by just clicking on that, or I approve clock in and out times by clicking on that. So pretty cool. That's the changes that we've made there. let's go back to the timesheet report. So when you've got the new integration on, you don't export the same way. So you don't export from this timesheet report. What you do is you do come in and approve your timesheets as per normal, but then you go into your Xero integration and you go to export timesheets. And so I can come in here and I've got to put the date range in. So I'm going to do it from the 2nd to the 8th. Now, notice it's only showing the 2 shifts because they're the 2 shifts that I just approved for Aiden. So it's that whole thing of like, am I sending only approved shifts over or am I sending all their shifts over? My general recommendation when I do training is that you should approve shifts and you should only send approved shifts over. But in this case, for me showing you guys what we're doing, I'm just going to send over all the timesheets. So we've got all 7 shifts there for the week. So I can choose which staff I want to send over. If I do want to sync over just a couple of staff, which is cool. I think you can multi-click as well, which is nice. So yeah, that's a nice little addition to the exporting. Let's go ahead and export this over. Cool. So it says 1 timesheet's been exported. So now if I come into ShiftCare and I go to timesheets, you should be able to see that timesheet for Aiden here. And if we open it up, it'll be, it works in the same way that the existing integration works. So we've got the 8 hours of Monday to Friday, then we've got Saturday hours 8 and Sunday hours 8 as expected. So that's not really groundbreaking in terms of the switch from the old integration to the new. But it's a new UI, so it is a little bit different. But other than that, it still functions the same way. So I guess the cool part is the invoicing, right? That's what everyone wants to see. So if we go to generate, and I'm going to create an invoice for this client from the 2nd to the 8th. Going to tick it, going to click generate. So that's going to create an invoice. Actually, you know what? I did forget something. I might just void that because there was one thing I wanted to show you guys about the invoicing that we've added as well. That's pretty cool. So let's go back to that client and let's put a billing contact on that client. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to call it Mr. Billing Contact and then billing email at email.com. Cool. And I'm going to tick billing contact. It's important, obviously, that you do that for any plan managed clients so that the system knows who's the person that's getting the billing, the email, the invoice. So let's go back and now let's generate that invoice again. Cool. All right. So traditionally what you've done is you've gone to list from here and you've hit download Xero and then you've downloaded a file. That's changed now. What you can do is you can go to list here and then you can go sync to Xero. And so that'll just take you to the export invoices via Xero. It's the same as coming to integrations in Xero and then clicking on export invoices. It's the same. That's the pathway to the same thing. And then I can say, I want to see invoices that I generated today, so issued today. And so here's this one invoice. Now, if you open it up, it will show you how many invoices the client has for that period and like what the invoice amounts are and stuff like that. Now, this tick box here is the big change that's different as well. And this wasn't even available in the old one. So it's important to understand what this means though. So it says invoice to billing contact name. So the way that the old export used to work with the file is that it would export with the client's name. And then if you had a billing contact, it would have the billing contact's email. It would always do that anyway. But what this tick box does is instead of, it'll still have the billing contact's email, but it'll also have the billing contact's name as the name. So it won't go against Michael Alexander. It'll go against Mr. Billing Contact instead. So I'll show you both ways because I can export it and then delete it and then export it again. So let's do it without the billing contact name and let's export that out. So that's exported over to Xero. So if we come into business invoices and we go to draft, that's the one here from today. So if I open that up, we're going to see that the invoice is still addressed to Michael Alexander, which is the client. And then if we mouse over or we click on the name, we can see that the email address is the billing email, which is what we want. We don't want the invoice going to the client. So that's exactly what the integration used to do, and it still does that now. It also still puts in the NDIS number, which I forgot to put in there, and the reference number. So nothing's changed in there. You do need to still put the NDIS number and everything in there. But let's do it again, but let's tick this box now. So if I tick this box and I export the invoices, nice and quick. So now you can see that it's gone over to the name of billing contact this time, because I ticked it and said I wanted it to go to the billing contact's name. So some people like the invoice to be addressed to the plan manager, because it still does put the client's name in the description, and you are still going to have the client's NDIS reference number up here. So some people are happy to just say, yes, I'm billing the plan manager. I'm not billing the client, I'm billing the plan manager, and it's an invoice for the client's services that you provided. So that's that little cool little step that we added as well, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I've kind of flown through that, but as I always do, nice and quick. Webinar is a good webinar, but I do know that usually there's 100 questions. So let's kick into that. How's it been going, Ian? Ian's passed out. He couldn't handle all the questions. No, he's here.
Hello. Sorry, I was on double mute. Paul, there's been some great questions coming in. I think if we start from the top, if we import an existing staff member, does that overwrite, like is the information that's in Xero overwrite any existing information in ShiftCare?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think probably it's the most hard part to get your head around with this new integration is the whole importing of staff. So no, it won't, because if the staff member already exists in ShiftCare, then the importing of it, all it does is link it. It doesn't create a new staff member. It doesn't overwrite anything. It just looks at the fact that the email already exists and it just links it together. It doesn't create. So it won't. So if you had a different name on the Xero profile and then you imported it, it won't change, because it'll just look at it and go, oh, it's already linked. So yeah, it won't overwrite any setup. Cool. I might just go down the list if that's all right, or you got another one?
Well, I was just going to follow up with that one about is there an option to select which staff are imported when you do that import? I don't believe there is.
There at this stage there isn't. So it will import the staff. What you probably can do though, if you do, so I think that there will be legitimate, and it was a question I asked when we were building out the integration. I think there will be legitimate cases where you have staff in Xero that you don't want in ShiftCare. The answer that I have to that would be that you will need to import them and then set them as a no access staff member. And then they won't show up and stuff like that. They'll be sort of out the way. The other thing to note too, like if you've got a subscription in ShiftCare for 50 staff and you have 58 staff in Xero, it won't create the 8 because you don't have the subscription space as well anyway. So it will only create what you've got in there. If the import is going to cause you dramas like that, then your best bet's just to create the staff in ShiftCare separately, and then it won't create the staff if you go above your subscription anyway. So there are ways around it. I do think we can fine tune this in the long term, but for now it should be functional.
Thanks, Paul. A couple of invoice number related questions. So we've got sort of questions around I guess, how do we stop ShiftCare creating an invoice number, or how, like if there's an existing sequence of numbers in Xero, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it is something that almost every client that I onboard asks me, how do I not use the ShiftCare invoice number? I hate the invoice numbers. I want to use the Xero sequence. At the moment, it will send over the invoice number that ShiftCare assigned to that invoice. And it's a simple reason. If you get audited, it kind of makes it easy to show that was the invoice in Xero. Here it is over in ShiftCare. And that's how we got to that number, is from these shifts. And so when you get audited, it's going to make it really simple to show that there's no weird stuff going on. Everything matches. The invoice number that's in Xero is the invoice number that you got in ShiftCare. That's how you got to that figure. It's all good to go. But I do understand that people want to see sequential invoice numbers, and ShiftCare doesn't do sequential invoice numbers. I think it's something we probably could look at down the road, whether there is an option that if we don't send the invoice number over, will it just use the next number in Xero's sequence? I don't know the answer to that, but the short answer is that you can't do that at the moment. ShiftCare will send over the invoice number, and it will create only the invoice with that number. I mean, you can always go in and change the number after, but it seems like a lot of work for a little, not much gain.
Yeah. Paul, one that's I think the answer is there isn't an impact here, but if you're doing the invoicing through ShiftCare, but use a separate platform to do the timesheets, how does this new feature impact things?
Yeah, well, I think you'll need to turn on the Xero integration, and you'll need to connect it. And you just won't use the timesheet portion of it, and you'll use the invoicing side of it. And then for the other integration, you would just go to account and settings and set the payroll software for that. So you would come in here. So say you were using KeyPay for your timesheets, then you would set it to KeyPay here, and then that would enable you, when you're on the timesheet report, to export the KeyPay timesheet. So yeah, you can still use two different platforms.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
I can see one from Renee. Does this work with contractors? So nothing changes in terms of contractors. So the biggest reason why we don't support contractors is because Xero doesn't support contractors, right? So you can't create a timesheet for a employee that you've marked as a contractor in Xero. And so because we use timesheets, it sort of rules them out. So we still follow the same functionality in the old integration, that you can set in the employment type here, you can set an employee to a contractor, and that will stop it from syncing timesheets, which is what it says here. So yeah, it will exclude contractors. In terms of importing them, I believe it will import contractors, and it will actually set the employment type to contractor for you.
Thanks, Paul. Renee, there is a help article using ShiftCare to cross-check invoices submitted by contractors and ABN staff. If you just search in the help for that, you'll find some tips on doing that. Thanks, Paul.
Cool. I might just start running through. I'm getting ahead of myself, but just so I don't forget, will I be able to have 2 emails for clients as well? It'll only send over 1 email. It'll send over whatever the email address is in the demographic detail. If you don't have a billing contact, and this is when we're talking about sending invoices over, and if you do have a billing contact, it'll send that email over. But yeah, it will never send 2 emails over. What you can do though is, I think in previous times I've seen people go over, once it's linked and it's sent the contact over and it's created it in Xero, you can go into that contact in Xero and just add additional emails to their profile, and it will continue to send it to those additional emails as well. Cool. Can we do a bulk update from ShiftCare to Xero to update the contact is in Xero that are in ShiftCare? I'm not sure if you're referring to staff or clients. The answer's no in both of them anyway. The ShiftCare doesn't update details in Xero it'll create the client if it doesn't exist, but from there they're kind of linked, and you can go and edit them as you please in Xero and change the details, and we won't change it back. And same with staff. We never really create staff in Xero. We sort of use Xero as the source of truth, so to speak. And then if you change anything over in Xero, in ShiftCare, it won't change it. It just sends timesheets. It doesn't update staff at any time. Can you edit that the customer's name in the NDIS would go through to the reference, or would that be a manual edit? Yeah, it'll be a manual edit. So you can, in the NDIS field for a star client, you can just put the client's name there if you want. So if you wanted to use that, so I assume you're thinking of using it that it bills against the billing contact's name. And then in here, what you could do is you could put Michael, Alexander, and then, you know, the number, whatever, and then that would show on the PO. But yeah, you'd have to do that. You can't make it put the name there automatically, but that should be good enough. That'll be cool if you want to do it that way. Can you edit the customer's name and then just go through the reference? Yeah, that I just answered that. I don't know why I read that again. Can you select the billing contact for one invoice, or is it an option for all? It is an option for all, but you can like filter the export before you do it. So you could go and say, oh, I only want to export, you know, clients that are, you know, so you could either choose specific clients, or you could have a special client type where, so you could create your own client type called plan managed billing contact or something, and then you could filter this by that client type and export it with the name ticked, and then do the rest of them without the name ticked, so to speak. So yeah, there's a couple of options there to get around that. When you invoice out of Xero, is there a way to ensure the line gets coded to the correct account, and if applicable, the correct tracking code? Yeah, good question. I didn't really talk about the whole code stuff. I kind of just wanted to cover the news integration and didn't really cover all of it. And perhaps maybe I should have gone through the whole nuts and bolts of how to do the Xero integration. But essentially, you should, before you export any invoices out of ShiftCare, you should be coming and checking your chart of accounts and making sure that the code that you've got, so this is, I've got my sales and I've changed the code to 100. That should be in your account and prices. You should make sure your price books are code. So each of them has an external ID. You got to make sure that that matches the external code that you want for the chart of accounts. So if you had some price books that you wanted to go under one chart of accounts and then another price book that goes under another, you would just put the different codes into those to make sure that they go against the right chart of accounts. We don't do tracking for timesheets or invoicing at the moment, tracking codes. Hopefully it's something that we can look at down the track. Is the NDIS billing code on the invoice directly related to the shift type we select when setting up? The billing code is the price book code. So it's this reference number here, and it's directly related to the price book that you select when you create the shift. Yes. So it's not shift type, it's the price book. If we're billing to billing contact in Xero, we don't need to look at two contacts to see how much we have invoiced a particular client. Yeah, exactly. So if you use that, say you've got a plan manager that's got 15 of your clients, if you tick that box and have it all going to that plan manager, then you'll be able to see all the plan managers' invoices in one spot. That's why people like to do that. So yeah, that's a really good practical reason of why people like to bill it to the plan manager and not to the client, so that you can just have one client, you'll have one profile for all of their clients under one, which is cool. What if the staff member is also a client? No, that shouldn't have any issues at all. Yeah, it looks only at the staff member's details when you're creating staff and looks at clients separately, so it should be fine. With the importing of staff, can you select it to only import one employee group? We have two ShiftCare's for two different states, but only one Xero for the whole company. No, but what happens is if you try to import staff into your ShiftCare and that email address is already used by another provider, so which your other account is another provider, it won't create the staff member anyway. So it shouldn't cause you any dramas with that, but it would be, I think we do need to, I think eventually we will need to look down the area of like getting to choose which staff you import or choosing groups of staff and stuff like that. So we probably will fine tune that down the track, but that shouldn't be an issue for you because those staff should already exist in another ShiftCare. Not sure if I meant to ask this here, but could we be responsible for approved timesheet on Xero showing Xero after creating a pay run? Yeah, pretty hard for me to answer without, I would say go to support just to get them to have a look at but I would be looking at make sure that the pay items are all linked, that the staff members, yeah, there could be a number of things for that. So hard for me to answer without looking specifically at your setup. Will the client information from Xero be synced in the existing profile in ShiftCare once imported? Can we only choose whom we want to import? So I assume the client information synced from Xero. So it will, when you sync it over from Xero to ShiftCare, it will create the info that's on it, and then you can update it in ShiftCare and do whatever. And then when you export it, I believe it's linked in the back end from then. So it probably won't update anything in Xero. It'll just add the invoice. So all that process is doing is creating an invoice against the client. It's not looking at the client's data at that point. So yeah, the answer should be no, it won't update, and it won't sync between the two, any updates after that. Can we choose whom we want to import? Yeah, well, with clients and staff, no, you can't choose. It'll do the whole lot in one go. I think that client import is probably like, I think it might be good for new businesses that are starting up with ShiftCare and maybe wanting to get their data in quicker. But other than that, it's probably a pretty loaded thing to run, like to import all your clients out of Xero. If you've had Xero going for 10 years and you've got 400 clients, you probably don't want to be running that import client into ShiftCare, because yeah, it'll put a bunch in there. I tried to add a line which is non-labor travel costs, but I couldn't find it under the NDIS price guide and wasn't even able to add it manually. Yeah, non-labor travel. I mean, if we're talking about like kilometers, then you should be using the per kilometer price here. If you're talking about wanting to charge for like tolls and stuff like that, you can add expense to the client's profile and choose a price book, and it'll use the code. Probably best to reach out to support if you're having specific issues with that, but there are answers to that to sort that out for you. Will this also cover provider travel and provider travel labor costs? Yeah, so yeah, that's probably more related to, so I've done a webinar recently on split mileage that talks about provider travel and activity-based transport and all that kind of stuff, if you're thinking of that side of things. But in terms of anything related to that, all we're talking about here is exporting an invoice that you've already created. And so that would have created the invoice in ShiftCare. It's got nothing to do with this integration, I guess, is the answer. It should all work fine. You won't have any dramas with it. Do we have an option to block the invoices that have been imported so they were not modified after they've been imported? From Xero, so the invoices that come over from ShiftCare into Xero will always be in a draft status. So I mean, no, but other than just approving them without touching them. But no, they'll always go over as a draft status, just in case there's any issues that you see that you need to look at. If I've set up my staff in Xero, then import, what happens if I have a new staff member? How do I then link them to ShiftCare? So you just run the import again. And you will need to do that. I think that's probably important to say that yeah, you will need to, if a new staff member starts, even if you create them in ShiftCare and Xero separately, you still have to run that import because it links them together. It's the only way to send the timesheets over. So at this stage, you need to run that import every time you get a new staff member. Will it be a point where this integration will be mandatory? Yes, there will be. We are not planning on supporting two types of integration in the long term. So yes, everyone will eventually have to move over to this. But having said that, if there's anything, I feel like the question is from a point of view that you're not happy with something that you don't want to be moved over. So I'd love, Leah, if you reach out to me, Paul at shiftcare.com, and let me know what your concerns are, because we wouldn't force people to move over until we thought it was at a point that everyone was pretty happy with it. You know, obviously we've got 4,000 providers, so we never make everybody happy, but I think we will. And I mean, there's things that we've talked about today that we can probably do better. And I think that's probably what we'll do before we force everyone to move over to the new integration. So yeah, we won't be doing it. Like, I'm not going to be like, hey, tomorrow everybody's got to be over by the end of the week. That's not going to happen. If the invoice number already exists in Xero, will this prevent the invoice from ShiftCare getting pushed across? Correct. It will say that the invoice already exists. So yeah, you can't do that. Boom, look at that. I smashed through all the questions.
Well done, Paul. Great webinar as ever. Thanks so much for handling all those questions and taking us through the new feature. Well done.
Yeah, no worries. And we'll be doing another webinar soon about some of the other cool little features, because we've been adding a bunch of little things, and I'm really keen to show people those little things so they don't get missed. So we'll be doing that. And yeah, please do reach out if you've got any feedback and stuff. Feel free to shoot me an email, paul@shiftcare.com. I'm keen to gather as much feedback and, make sure that this integration's good. And like I said, I am going to jump straight out of this webinar now and go and flick this new integration on for everybody. So the integration is going to be available for you in the settings area to turn on. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your week.
Thanks, Paul.
Ian.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, mate. See ya.